Indian Camp, one of Ernest Hemingway's many short stories set in northern Michigan, was first published in the 1924 issue of the Transatlantic Review. The following year, it appeared in Hemingway's debut story collection, In Our Time. Over time, Indian Camp has become one of Hemingway's most frequently anthologized works. The story is partially based on Hemingway's own childhood and young adulthood visits to Petoskey, Michigan. It follows young Nick Adams as he accompanies his father, Dr. Adams, on a medical mission. The story begins with Nick and his father setting off in a boat on Lake Michigan, accompanied by two unnamed indigenous men. The narrator does not specify their tribes. Another boat follows, carrying an indigenous man and Nick's uncle George, who smokes a cigar. The two indigenous men row their boat while Nick reclines with his father's arm around him. Upon reaching the camp, Uncle George offers cigars to the rowers. The group follows the indigenous men through the woods, passing a pack of barking dogs, until they reach the camp where their help is needed for a woman in labor who has been in pain for 2 days. While an older woman assists the laboring woman inside a small shack, the men sit outside in the dark, smoking and avoiding the woman's screams. Only the woman's husband remains inside, resting on the top bunk with an injured foot while his wife lies on the lower bunk, still in labor. As the men enter the shack, the woman's screams echo through the room. Dr. Adams immediately gets to work, instructing that water be boiled to sterilize his equipment while explaining to Nick the process of labor. When Nick claims to understand, the doctor scolds him and explains what labor actually is, all while the woman continues to scream. Nick asks if there's anything they can do to stop her screaming, to which Dr. Adams responds, "No, I haven't any anesthetic, but her screams are not important. I don't hear them because they are not important." After this, the husband turns away in his bunk. The doctor carefully washes his hands and informs Nick that the baby is in a breech position. He asks Uncle George to pull back the quilt covering the woman, stating that he'd rather not touch it. The doctor then begins the procedure, performing an unanesthetized caesarean section on the woman while instructing 3 indigenous men and Uncle George to hold her down. The woman, in pain, bites Uncle George, who responds with a slur. The indigenous men laugh at him, but Dr. Adams remains focused on his work. Nick, unsettled by the scene, refrains from watching. After some time, the doctor delivers a baby boy, removes the afterbirth, and begins to suture the incision. He tells Nick he can look away while he sews up the wound, and Nick, relieved, does so. His curiosity, he notes, has been gone for a long time. Unlike Nick's discomfort, Dr. Adams takes pride in his work. He boasts, "I did it with a jackknife and sewed it up with 9-foot tapered gut leaders." Meanwhile, Uncle George rubs his wounded arm, and Dr. Adams offers to sterilize the bite. The new mother, exhausted, is cleaned up, and the men go to check on the woman's husband, who has been lying in the top bunk. To their shock, they find that he has slit his own throat. In contrast to the cesarean, which went largely unremarked, Nick notes that the man's blood had flowed down into a pool where his body sagged the bunk. Dr. Adams quickly ushers Nick out of the tent, but the boy has already seen everything. The doctor rows the boat back home while Uncle George stays behind. On the way, Nick asks whether childbirth is always so difficult and whether suicide is more common among men or women. Dr. Adams answers plainly, saying such events are relatively rare. Nick then asks if death is difficult, and the doctor replies, "No, I think it's pretty easy, Nick. It all depends." As they row across the lake, Nick watches the sun rise and sees a bass leap from the water. Listening to the sound of his father's rowing, Nick feels quite sure that he would never die. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe. Thank you.